All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. I'd like to welcome you to the start of the fall edition of the Squash Canada Coach Professional Development webinar series. We will have many of these over the course of the upcoming fall, with three more scheduled in September and October, and then many more into November, December, and then some into the new year as well. So I hope that you'll look to register for those as well. Today's topic is building a successful junior squash program, Grassroots to High Performance. Our presenter today is the one and only Andrew Thompson from the Toronto Lawn Tennis Club. He's the head squash pro there for 25 plus years. I'm not going to get into too many details about what he does there, as he's going to talk to you about that today and what he's done to grow his program from bare bones to one of the best programs in the country. So I will leave it to Andrew to speak to that. But please help me in welcoming Andrew to today's presentation. Take it away, Andrew.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to Squash Canada for hosting me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So welcome to everyone to building a successful junior squash program. For those of you who don't know me, just a little bit, Jeff touched on a couple of things there. Obviously, Andrew Thompson, certified level provincial level coach, I guess, in the competition screen. They used to call that the old level 3, for those of you who are as old as I am. And as Jeff mentioned, been a squash pro for over 25 years now. Career started off in Montreal, eventually became a head pro at Mirabel Racket Club, which unfortunately no longer exists, and also became the head coach of the McGill men's and women's squash teams before moving to Toronto in 1999. Became the head squash pro here at the Toronto Lawn Tennis Club. Did that for 12 years, and then a little distinction there. I did move into the athletics director position about 8 years ago, but I'm still involved in high performance coaching here at the club. I kind of handle the high performance kids, and I guess that's what I'll be talking about next week if you guys are able to make it out to that presentation as well. In addition to working at a private club, I think it's important to mention that I also have started a program recently in the last couple of years at a place called Glendon College, because that's a public club, and running programs at public clubs are very different than running programs at private clubs. And I will say, having done both, the private club is a lot easier to get things going in, a lot more resources, a lot more support. So, I'll be trying to touch a little bit on that. Today, we're going to be using primarily the Toronto Lawn as a case study, since it has gone through the different growth phases of a junior squash program, from starting from scratch all the way up to the mature 20-year-old program that it is today. Every stage has its challenges. It's not like you make it 20 years and then it's all smooth sailing. It is smoother sailing, but definitely you have your challenges along the way. So hopefully that'll touch on everybody's experience. So Jeff, you can shoot over to the next slide there. And actually we'll just go through that one to the one after. And a little bit about the Toronto Lawn, excuse me, so you know the dynamics that we've been working with, because every facility is a little bit different. Toronto Lawn Tennis Club is primarily a tennis club, has 18 tennis courts, but only 3 international squash courts and 1 double squash court. So I started the club in 1999, and when I came on, we had about 89 squash players at the time and about 10 to 15 junior players. There were no gold kids, low silver at best, and we started from there. By 2005, we reached 175 adults and 70 juniors in the program. We were up to hired a second squash pro, Dan Sibley, if those of you who know him, he was my assistant for a few years. By 2007, we reached over 200 adults, and our wait list started for the junior program. And then if fast forward another 13 years from there, how things have continued to grow. We have over 160 junior squash members. We run 14 clinics a week. We have 3 squash pros, and all of them are doing full-time hours. We we also have a couple of assistants that help on weekends and for a few clinics here and there as well. We also have, I guess, a unique position because we only have the 3 squash courts. We have 105 juniors on a 4-year wait list to get into the program. So that's kind of a good news, sad story all wrapped up in one, because you hate to see kids on a wait list. I would say they're allowed to get on the wait list at age 4, so they wouldn't be playing in our program for a couple years anyway. So yeah. And I emphasize the fact that you start off with silver kids, and slowly over time they develop, and eventually you get to the point where your juniors are winning provincial championships, making national teams, and going off and playing for top schools around the world. So it's a great thing to be a part of. Next slide there. Okay, so something I really like to emphasize with coaches and pros is the potential for program revenue. I think this is something that we all need to be able to speak to owners and operators of facilities and our managers. They don't always appreciate that where this can go. So I think the Toronto Lawn is a great example of where it can go because it is a very financially viable program. So in 1999, when we started, it was projected that we would do $10,000 in revenue, and we got up to 17,000. And again, that was built largely on getting the successful junior program off the ground. By 2005, the program did $70,000 in revenue, and by 2019, it did $160,000 in program revenue. So now that's not to be confused with membership fees for juniors. That's totally above and beyond. So just program revenue alone, $160,000, and that's lessons, camps, leagues, and clinics with all three primary pros contributing to that. We estimate that junior squash members contribute about $150,000 to $200,000 more dollars a year to food and beverage revenue at the club. So that's a significant metric to be able to communicate to your managers and owners. And it's very important to note that squash members are the most loyal and highly retained components of our club, like tennis members. So it's really important for facility owners to appreciate that squash players are likely to stick around for many, many years, unlike fitness members, which can be very transient for club owners. So those are all really powerful things that you can communicate to justify why a junior program is important, why giving the court time over is viable, and it creates lifelong members. Okay, next slide. So it's a long story there, 20 years. How did we get there? What promotional tools did we use to get there? So I'm going to go through a variety. And some of these I've also used at Glendon College. So the number one tool, without a doubt, is free introductory half-hour lessons. Now, of course, it can be any length of time, and every squash coach hates the word free, but honestly, this is an investment in your future, one that will pay back exponentially over time. I would say that when we do a free introductory lesson, we get at least a 90% retention rate from people trying it, loving it, and wanting to be part of our program. So there's nothing really more powerful. To be honest, I started doing this back in 1999 here at the club, and I've never stopped. We do 20 plus of these a year at least, and it's a primary building component for our program. Okay, so that's tool one. Moving on to another tool that's very effective at helping you build your program is obviously something we all do, probably too much of, is email. And I just want to make a distinction between email and email that has a invitation to come and try squash for free. And not only try squash for free, but maybe also include providing equipment for free. Every time we can take away a barrier for entry, we're more likely to get people involved in the game. So you want to make it no risk. So if you send an email, come down, take a lesson, it's going to cost you such and such dollars, that's really not always going to get a person to do it. Money could be a barrier, the effort, where do I get equipment? But if you put everything in there and they see that there's no reason to say no, you're much more likely to get somebody to do it. So that's another great tool. So moving into tool number three. Now, nothing's more important than this tool in terms of your advertising, So email is one thing, but I think we all are guilty of relying on that too much. There's nothing really more powerful than speaking to people in person. That's where they get to that opportunity to feel your excitement, enthusiasm for the game. So I think back in the day, I never let anybody walk by me without saying, hey, why don't you come and try squash? I'll bring the equipment, you just show up, it's free. And it's really an effective way. And in terms of also promoting your programs too, again, an email is sort of void of emotion, but when you sit there talking to somebody and telling them about your program, they're gonna, again, feel that and feel much more inclined to try it. So prioritize speaking to people either on the phone, I know it's old fashioned sounding, or in person. Whenever you have that opportunity, it'll really help you seal the deal and get them into your program. So the fourth tool that we've used over the years is the free introductory clinic. So when you get too many lessons for those free intro lessons, You can do a clinic. It's not quite as effective. Nothing really beats having a pro rally with a person. It sure beats having two beginners being kind of left to their own devices to hopefully get a rally going and not hit each other. I once had that happen where I put two beginners on a court and one hit the other in the head with a racket, and that was the end of both of them ever playing squash again. So you got to be careful. Again, if the pro can facilitate the rally, that's best. And again, if you can provide the equipment, there's no reason for them not to come down. But sometimes people do prefer the group environment. They feel less self-conscious, and it's good to offer both. So I wouldn't do one over the other, but I would look to offer both. Moving into tool 5 here. This is not so much a tool, but a concept, I guess, but it's the idea of programming them right away. So if you do get them in for that lesson or that clinic, move them immediately into a program. I think a lot of us squash pros tend to just hope people will play on their own and that'll be it. But most sports will try to get you into a league right away and playing right away on a regular basis. It's true for junior programs. Get them into your clinic, get them into your weekly junior league or box ladder or whatever it is, but program them right away. So Jeff and I talked a little bit earlier about, I kind of moved through some of this material, recognizing that I tend to go fast and maybe glossing over some details. So if anybody has any questions as we go along here, feel free to either type them out in the chat, or if you want to speak up now, we're going to take a little pause here for any questions maybe about some of these initial promotional tools. If there aren't any, we'll carry on. So Jeff, I'll let you flag me questions.
It's Dan and Chad. I'm here. Able to see Squash Club. I couldn't get the online link, but I do have a question about the context that you're pushing it out in. So for instance, you talked about the emailings or the promotional tools. Like, is that just something you're finding within your club, or like where are you pushing those out to?
Right, okay, so yeah, we're halfway through the promotional tools here, so I cover all ends of that. So these are the tools that we're using within the club, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use outside the club. So they're coming up. So like, because with the Glendon program, for example, I don't really have members that I'm directing my advertising to. So in those cases, I advertise to a broader community. So that's a great question, and I'll come back to that as we kind of move through this, through the presentation. Any other questions out there before I carry on to the next part? Okay. All right, I'll take that as a no. So moving into the next part of the promotional tools. So tool number 6, super important here. Think about networking through your adult squash members for building your program. I think this is the thing that I did the most when I started here. I called every single member, asked them if they had kids. If they had kids, I encouraged them to come down to the club and try squash for free. Adult squash members already love squash, so it's an easy sell for them to want to put their kids into your program. They're the most, yeah, like I said, they're the easiest sell of any kind of demographic that you're going to go after to get their kids. So keep that in mind. And, you know, always find out people's background and find out if they have kids, because those are your first customers. Tool number 7, network through other sports at your facility. So this is something we've done successfully here over time at the Toronto Lawn. We had tennis, squash, ping pong events. This is a great way, not force people to try a sport, but part of the fun. They're there, oh, we're going to try a little squash. We're all new to this. So it really breaks barriers for people who are maybe very good tennis players or table tennis players or whatever sport you got going. They try to squash. Like I said earlier, squash sells itself. We've also done biathlons, tennis squash events. Again, another way to get our tennis members trying squash. We have a lot of tennis members here, so I wasn't going to hesitate in trying to pillage them for squash members. Obviously, squash is a great fit for tennis players. They already have the racket skills and they can get rallies going right away. That whole concept of multi-sport or getting people doing multiple things in your facility, that should be a really attractive idea to your owners. Smart owners will love this. The more engaged your members are, the more likely they are to stay at your facility. So it really helps with retention again. So tool number 8, talking about you know, the standard issue here, using posters, social media posts, e-weekly news, if you guys have an e-news that you send out, or a quarterly magazine for your club. Obviously using social media, Instagram, Facebook. We're going to get into some of the specifics of those as we go along here, but they're all very valuable and should all be used. So you're using all of the above, emails, networking through your members, you're using all the above, but specifically for the advertising component, you want to use all the tools that you have available to you. I will say briefly that, obviously I work at the Toronto Law, and we have a lot of resources. We have an amazing communications team that puts this stuff together for us, but I did make all this stuff on Word myself for a lot of years. In fact, when the Glendon program, just in the last couple of years, I quickly put together a couple of ads in Word, really easy, grab a picture, put some words on it. Doesn't have to be fancy, but it's a great way to get your tool out if you don't have that support system that a lot of private clubs have. So the ninth key tool for promoting and developing a junior program is, what Chad was asking about, advertising outside the club into your community. And one thing I really liked and used successfully was going to the local school, and a lot of schools now have their own little advertisements that go out. So little magazines or little newsletters, and it's either electronic or physical. So for example, my community where my kids are, I advertised at their school, and for $25 a month, I could run this little squash card ad, business card size. And it was great. I got people into my program. So that $25 was easily covered by people joining. And, I don't think newspapers are necessarily the way to go because it's just so expensive. But if you print flyers and hand them out in parts of your community that have a lot of kids, like I said, those little community advertisements, people do tend to read them and find out what's going on. So those are great ways. Flyers, cards, so on and so forth, and you can put them in people's mailboxes. Those are all great ways to reach out into the community. Another way to reach out into the community is tool number 10. So you take your existing members who are already, your juniors or your adult members, but today we're talking about juniors, and get them to bring a friend. So, and do that often. So they bring a different friend each time. And that friend comes down, they have each other to play with. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that. And those are great, that's a great opportunity to bring those kids into your program. So I really encourage Bring a Friend Day. Try to do multiple Bring a Friend Days if you can over the course of a year. Encourage the kids to bring someone new each time. So the last tool are the school programs. And now I am definitely far from an expert with this. I've never had to use it. I do know people who've had a tremendous amount of success using the school programs, as it's a great way to get people to come to your club, see it, try squash. My only comment is transition these kids into your main junior program right away. Don't let them just come in with school. Like if you see any of them showing any enthusiasm or potential, walk up to them, let them know you see that in them, and encourage them to be a part of your program. So actually, Jeff, we did talk about every 5 pages or so, but I think this is a good spot to talk about because we are going to be changing topics a little bit. So if anybody else has any questions about promotional tools in general, how we use these tools. But like I said, we use all of these tools, and I encourage you to use all of them. The more things you use and do, the more success you're going to have in building your program. But these are really the very foundational tools that you'll have at your disposal to make things happen. So any questions about some of the promotional tools that we've talked about today?
Prior just to any questions that we might have, I'm just going to comment on the school programs as well. This is a good time to mention that tentatively scheduled for January 2021, Pete Goodings from Royal Glenora in Edmonton is going to be doing a squash for schools or schools for squash type webinar. We're just working out the logistics. So if that is something of interest to you, we will have that topic later on in the webinar series. So keep that in mind. And any other questions for Andrew on this topic?
All right. Doesn't look like it. So, okay, we'll move into the next slide there, reduce barriers to entry. So I did talk about this sort of indirectly, but ultimately it's about giving people no reason to say no. So the old adage we had was no racket, no glasses, no ball, no problem. Here you go. Either they borrow it from you, or you can even put together something that provides it for them as part of their cost. Have shoes on hand. Like, again, like make it easy for people. It's a really important concept to keep in the back of your mind. We provide a free equipment at our come and try lessons and in our clinics. And I'll just say, a few years ago, I remember arranging with Black Knight. They were really great and accommodating with this. They sold us racquetball and glasses inexpensively enough that we could offer racquetball, glasses, 3 intro clinics, all for 99 bucks. Now, I'll be the first to admit that it was probably a wash. Probably I didn't make a lot of money doing it, if any. But the point is, it got tons of people through the door. My club even made a commitment. I think we bought 100 sets of these. It was the way we could get our costs down. And we eventually went through all the sets. It took a couple years, but we got through all the sets. People had instant equipment. And I also remember speaking to Alvin at Squash Alberta not too long ago. He had a great way to package this. He called it Squash to Go. And again, same kind of concept. People come down, they have 2 or 3 intro clinics, they get the equipment, and then he right away puts them into a program or something going on at their club. So really powerful way to get kids and people involved in your squash program. All right, moving into the next.
We have a question here for you, Andrew. Trevor Bodo from the White Oaks in Niagara asks, are you still lending free equipment during the period of COVID?
Oh, great question. We are, because we sanitize everything. So yeah, actually one thing, I'm glad you asked that question, because one thing I wanted to mention is this entire presentation is geared to normal times in squash. Obviously, COVID presents its own slew of challenges, and there's a lot of modifications we have to make for everything. But this is why right now is such a great opportunity to be learning these things, because these are all things that we can start to apply as we go along. And I will kind of speak to COVID related changes we're making at the end. You guys are welcome to ask any questions at the end of the presentation about that.
And then one more quick question here from Giselle Delgado. She asks, money is usually a deterrent, especially at squash-only clubs. Will you be discussing programs such as urban squash later on?
I hadn't planned for any discussions about urban squash. I'm not sure that I'm the best expert for that. We do support urban squash through our club with a lot of charities, but I haven't actually worked with them indirectly other than to volunteer my time with them. But I really think they're fantastic programs, but I'm not necessarily an expert on those particular angles. So, but if you do have a question about it, I'll do my best to answer it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so with retention, okay, I like this analogy. Obviously, you can't fill a bathtub if the drain isn't plugged. If you're bleeding juniors all the time, you're gonna just have the same number of kids, or you're gonna be losing kids. So the most important thing, and we're gonna be talking more about this as we go along, is how do you get the kids to stay in your program? Out of the 160 junior squash members we have in our program, we probably lose 10 to 15 a year just through normal attrition, going off to university. No matter how great a job you do, there's going to be kids who lose interest. It's just the way things go. Squash isn't for everybody. I genuinely believe most people can love the game for a lifelong period, but you got to accept that you are going to lose. The key thing is that you got to be growing faster than you lose. So we gain about 30 juniors a year onto our wait list. So that means we have, plus 15 every year, and that's why we're at a 4-year, 115 person wait list, just because of those dynamics. So you got to make sure that you're growing faster and that you are providing a really quality product and experience that people don't want to leave. So we'll get into some of the details on how to do that as we go along. But one of the key things to consider is that you want to make sure that every junior is enjoying themselves, and you want to do that by asking them regularly. Your coaches, you're in there, you can kind of tell when someone isn't feeling it. Ask them, hey, what's going on? It can often be a case that they're just not feeling confident in their skills or their ability to play with the other kids. We will speak to a parent and say, hey, we noticed that little Johnny or little Jessica is kind of lagging a little bit. Would you consider coming in for a private one-on-one lesson? I can help catch them up. And we do it from a place of genuinely caring that person stays in squash, so the parent doesn't get the impression that we're just trying to sell them on more lessons. It's really just about tidying up your loose ends. One other thing that we do is that we survey people all the time here. So after every summer camp we survey members and say, how was your experience? What did you like? What did you not like? Was the food good? What could we do better? And that's such valuable information. I mean, you don't take it personally. You know, sometimes the feedback might sting a little, but at the end of the day, you're going to benefit from receiving that feedback and acting on it in a positive way. So I really encourage the use of surveys. We survey seasonally as well. How are our junior clinics? And like I said, we speak to people all the time. You can tell when people aren't enjoying themselves. So don't be shy about asking that question. It's not a question of you failing or not. It's a question of what can you do to tweak it to make it that much better for the person. And it's that little extra effort that really makes a difference. I remember talking to Jamie Nichols back in the day when he was coaching like I was, and he always spoke about having his eye on that little guy at the back of the room and making sure that that person was having fun too. And I think that's such a great attitude to exemplify. Okay, next slide. Okay, so ways to promote junior squash at your club. Now we have the traditional advertising that we talked about earlier, like, you know, the emails, the posters, and so on and so forth. And those are what I would call static. They tell you about this thing that's happening, but nothing's more powerful than telling that story afterwards with pictures and on social media. So that does the whole thing for you. It tells people that not only are you offering quality program or event or experience, but look how much fun people are having, and like that speaks volumes in itself. So it's really important to consider doing the pre-advertising and then the post-advertising, the telling of the story, and then that will speak to people in a way that is so much more powerful. And without you saying we're great, it looks like you're great. So as you can see from the two pictures used in the slide, it does exactly that. One of them is telling about an event ahead of time, and the next one is all the celebration of that event and then the kids and what a great time they had. So show people the story as much as you can using pictures. And like I said earlier, these posters are fancy. They are done by professionals on our communications team, but you can do that with Word yourself these days and by taking pictures off the internet. So it's all there for you. Okay, the next slide. Okay, we're gonna get into how to structure your program. And this structure I use for both the Toronto one and Glendon. We follow a seasonal structure that coincides with the school year because it's just easier for everybody, especially parents. And what I've found is that it's typically the moms that do the bulk of the organizing for their kids when it comes to these programs. One thing that's really key is advertising early. So the distinction is in a private club, you can get away with a 6-week lead time. For a public club, I'm competing against other sports, so I need to be at least 3 months ahead of time. And that will be longer when it's the end of the school year and I'm advertising for September. I'm advertising the spring for September because I'm gonna lose everybody to summer holidays and I won't be able to reach them with my advertising. So make sure you get that lead time, and it's really important. So we run our junior clinics 3 times per year, fall, winter, and spring. And then in the summer, we run summer camps exclusively. Each of the 3 clinic sessions of fall, winter, and spring are 8 to 12 weeks each. And they also include a teen-only round robin. And now that's because we were finding that a lot of our teens were falling off at a higher rate of attrition than our other groups of kids. So by starting up a teen round robin for the silver level or the more recreational teenagers, it really helped keep them in the game. And actually, one other little distinction about keeping teenagers into the game is putting them into your adult programs as soon as the adults will allow. And this is something that adults get used to. They don't necessarily like playing against little kids, but they're more comfortable playing against teenagers. So we found that by helping our silver kids or the kids who are more recreational transition to the teen round robin and then into like our adult house leagues, that was a great way to keep them playing the game all the way through. And that's really what we're looking for. The other component of our junior clinics is our all girls clinic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but we have both of our teen round robins and all girls clinics taking place on the weekends, as do our additional high performance clinics. So about ratios and stuff, this is important stuff. So we aim for 3 kids per court in both the programs that I oversee. We want to have never more than a 5-to-1 kid to coach ratio. I think you can do 4 or 5 kids on a court if you're feeding them yourself, but asking them to be there by themselves on the court without a coach directing a very specific feeding session is just not going to be fun. 6 kids on the coach is a long waiting time, and again, just not fun. So you're always monitoring that fun level. And yes, I understand that there's a financial consideration here, and you got to make it viable. But if you don't have a quality offering, people are not going to stick around. So short-term gain for long-term pain. You always want to be kind of going the other way if you can. We have the 3 courts going for the junior clinics, as mentioned. We'll have 2 senior coaches on 2 of the courts. If we have a group with a really diverse levels, so like we have some good kids and some weaker kids, we might even bring in a 3rd student coach to just rally with kids on a 3rd court. So that's something to consider. All right, so moving into camps a little bit. We do run camps all year round. We run summer camps, as mentioned. We also run March break camps. At our club, the private club, there's 2 weeks of March break, so we do 2 weeks. At Glennon, we do just the 1 week, if we were to do that. And then something we started a couple of years ago, we've had a lot of success with that I really encourage people to consider, is running those professional development days the kids have off at school. Parents love for there to be a camp on those days because they have no childcare a lot of the time. So you can offer full or half-day options. We actually offer that at all our camps, except for our summer camps. We generally would go with the full-day option. But yeah, consider half and full-day options for your March breaks. Maybe some people have also done Christmas holiday camps. That's another great little period where you can put together a 4 or 5 day camp. But again, those PD camps have been great. We get up to 20 kids at some of those, so they're really, really great. All right, moving into the next slide. So yeah, part 2, structuring your program. So getting a little bit into sort of some of the events that you'll be doing. Club championships, we run a club championships every year. That is a must do if you don't already. Even just including that in your adult, like a junior section in your adult club champs is a way you can do it. We run ours in late spring. We try to make it happen just after nationals. In this poster here, you see that our communications department did for us. It says April 26th. Recently, in recent years, we've been doing more mid-May, just because we run our junior program to the beginning of June. And if we can put the club championships for the kids closer to the end, it just kind of makes the whole thing culminate with kind of a great send-off. We try to do a large silver tournament every year. Now, I should just start by saying Ontario their model is not the same for all across the country, but I know more parts of the country are moving to this. But we have the bronze, silver, so on, gold, and provincial championship kind of structure here. We like to host a silver tournament at our club because that's where the bulk of our juniors fall into. So we're able to get over 30 of our own juniors participating in a silver tournament when we do it at our club, and it makes a lot of sense for us. So consider hitting the demographic that you are represented by most with your junior players. We also like to do 2 junior bronze tournaments a year or equivalents. So an equivalent would be playing a home and away series with a local club. So we would play against the Badminton Racket Club, which just happens to be up the street from us. And that we would bring our beginner kids over. We'd speak to the pros over there and say, hey, we're gonna be bringing these beginner kids, these ages, so that they match up in a similar way so that everybody gets good games. That's really a developmental exercise. So you don't really care about who wins or loses. It's just about going out and having fun. So just breaking down where our recreational program, how we structure that in a week, a little more detail here. Our junior program runs every day of the week now, except for Fridays. And we have done stuff on Fridays in the past, but it's just a bit of a tough sell at this club. But we run our recreational program Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and our high performance program runs Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or Friday night. The Friday night thing is something we just did recently. For our high performance program, I feel that you can very comfortably say to a parent that the kids should be doing at least 1 private lesson a week. I think that's a fair thing to say. You're really doing a disservice to a kid if they only do clinics and they go to a tournament. They just don't have that one-on-one time to develop their technique and serve return and things like that. So, obviously it's about what your members can afford to. So there's a balance there, but it's maybe it's almost a disservice for the kids not to be pursuing a little bit of private coaching if they are going to compete. So just throwing that out there, particularly for gold level kids. Obviously, there's more forgiveness there with kids who are less serious. And as mentioned earlier, our team round robins take place on Sundays, mid-afternoon, and our all-girls clinic we run Sunday evenings, and we run 2 of those all year round. Okay, next slide. So on the topic of celebrating girls and all-girls clinics, we really failed at this for so many years of the Toronto Lawn. It took a lot of learning. And eventually, you know, we would lose 50% of all the girls, especially by the time it got to 13. That was it. We lost them. And it was only with that transition to adding in these all-girls clinics that we suddenly had this incredible retention. And we realized, and any female coach would have told us a long time ago, but there's so few of them around, that girls love to be with girls. And when you do that, it's very social for them. They come down, they have a great time, and they want to keep going. And what we found really interesting is that they are now permeating all, like they have full rights to do the co-ed clinics as well, and we encourage that. And they are more confident to do it. They have their girls only experience, and they move into our co-ed clinics. And it's amazing to see. I would say now we have about 50% of our program are girls. And we've had camps, we had all girls sign up. It's just an incredible experience. So it's been really great to see that growth. And again, it all stems from the all girls clinic. It also stems from having a female coach. Now, it's tough to even talk about this because there's unfortunately so few female coaches in Canadian squash, and we really need more. And hopefully by us having, you know, all clubs having more girls playing, this will happen in time. But if you know, we were fortunate enough here to find an ex-junior who's now a young adult come in and coach our all girls clinics with one of our male coaches on the Sundays, and that's been hugely successful for us. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to kind of whip through this a little bit. We started kids at 6 years old in our main programs. That's because we found that we had a 50% retention rate if we started them any younger. By waiting till they were 6, we shot up to like an 80 or 90% retention rate. So it just has to do with ease of learning. When you're a little older, it's just a little easier to learn the game. That said, we do have an intro to racket skills program at the Toronto Lawn for 3 to 5 year olds. And with Glendon, I did start the kids at 5, but being an experienced coaches can kind of recognize that they shouldn't be doing too much too young. So that's really the big deterrent. We do encourage parents to play with the kids before 6 years old. That's a great way for the kids to get started. And just in brief, we do obviously follow the long-term athlete development model. I'll get more into that next week when we talk in high performance. So 6 year olds play once a week, sometimes 2. 8 year olds, by 8, we like to see them playing twice a week minimum. By 10, 3 times a week. And high performance kids, obviously, they go on from there. Next slide. Okay, so why is high performance important? I mean, a lot of coaches or pros have felt over the years like, oh, so much work, so much hassle, why do it? You know, they can easily be the group that takes up the most of your time with the least amount of appreciation, but it is truly the engine that drives your entire program. Those are the kids who are the most invested, the most enthusiastic, and most passionate about squash, and it is contagious. So you want them in your program. They're, as I mentioned on the slide, they're your highest participating juniors. They're your most consistent source of lesson takers. I've had kids take the same lesson with me every Tuesday at 5:40 for years, you know. So it's quite amazing how into it they can get. And, you know, they inspire other kids to come to tournaments, and they inspire kids in your sessions themselves. The other kids see how engaged they are when they're doing their drives and stuff like that. All it takes is having a clinic of complete rec kids to realize how tough it can be to engage them. But when you throw in a couple high performance kids in there, suddenly they're a lot more focused. And ultimately, you know, these high performance kids are the ambassadors for your program. So they go out to other clubs, people see them, they learn about your club. Again, it brings more volume and more traffic to your facility. All right, so I'll move on to the next slide. So coaching considerations. I'm not going to get a lot into coaching today because we'll be covering that next week, but it's really all about having a balance of fun and learning within your clinics, and that is key for retention. We learned this lesson the hard way. And I love to quote Scott Arnold. Some of you may know Scott. He used to work for us a few years ago. And he used to always say to the kids, do you want to have fun now, or do you want to have fun at the tournament when you win? And that was a great way to get the kids just to engage in the learning component of the clinic. So you got to have a balance. Too much fun leads to kids falling off by the time they're teenagers. It's just, kids who were really into it when they're young, if they don't learn and improve enough and see themselves progress, they can fall off. So you got to be careful about going too much to one end or the other. Obviously, too much learning can be boring and stilted. So you got to find that balance. Make sure you have both in every single clinic. Every week we run at both Glendon and Toronto Lawn weekly themes. So week 1, they'll do grip and forehand. Week 2, they'll do backhand. Week 3, they may do straight shots. When I say backhand, I'm not doing backhand the whole clinic. They're gonna start on backhand and they're gonna go back and do some more forehand and grip checks and stuff like that. The next week we might do straight versus cross courts with forehands and backhands, which you can start feeding multiple shots on. Week 5 we would cover the serve. Week 6 we do volleys before we get into return to serve on week 7. Then you get into some of the other shots, boasts, lobs, returning to the tee. And then we always do a games day. We usually do a games day halfway through and at the end. That's something the kids really look forward to. They get familiar with your routine. We repeat these every year, every season and every year. And within those broader themes, we also have a bunch of drills that are time tested to be fun and interesting and also teaching for the kids. So each of these little drills, like one typical one all of us pros should be doing is we put down targets and we have them play a game, the first kid to hit X number of targets, or you get 3 points for this really specific target, but 1 point for this broader target. Like there's so many ways to play with it. So yeah, we can definitely talk about that in the question and answer period as well. Obviously I'm a big proponent of every single clinic needs to have 2 things. You need to have a playing part of it. So at the last 5 or 10 minutes, the kids play the pro and they love the whole concept of beat the pro. Sometimes the pro will give the racket away to the kid and go, okay, you earn my racket for beating me, just not forever, but just for the next point or 2 until they lose, whatever. So have a little play the pro component at the end. That's really important. And I love to make kids do sprints at the end, like 6 sprints, 8 sprints, something really short. It just gets them pumped up and they leave, and a little bit of fitness there. Next slide. So yeah, a little more coaching considerations here. So a little technique brief, because I see that I'm shooting through my time here. We teach a very basic swing that's easy to learn. You see Greg Gauthier in this picture demonstrating it here for you. It is what I call vertical racket preparation. We make sure all our coaches, the reason we chose that swing is because, Greg Gauthier is one of the most accurate players who have ever played the game. Amr Shabana, the other, had a very similar swing to the most accurate players. So we based our program on this swing, allowing for variations and recognizing that there's many ways up the mountain. And we just make sure that all the coaches in our program are teaching the same swing so that we are on the same page and consistent, and we do allow for variation from with the players. One key thing is to make sure that proper grip is achieved by your high performance players by 12 years old at the latest, and 14 years old for rec players at the latest. And now it's something that's so hard for us coaches because it can feel like beating a dead horse, but without the proper grip, you never get the proper swing. Some really bizarre variation of a swing will develop over time, but if they do have the proper grip without coaching, they'll get a pretty decent swing if they play enough squash. Okay, next slide. So creating a culture of progression and improvement. So we talked earlier about bronze, silver, gold, provincial. You got to come up a way to do this for your kids with whatever system you're working with. If you're on the same system as Squash Ontario and US Squash, which has similar systems, take them to a bronze tournament. Talk to them about once you win a bronze, then you'll be able to play a silver tournament. Oh, you've won a silver tournament. Now you can move into a gold tournament. Or if you made it to the semifinals of a silver, you can play gold, but it'll be tough to win a match. You kind of prepare the kids for each step and encourage them to progress. It's that sense of progression that really keeps them engaged in the game. We have something called a skills program at the club that we've just recently developed. It's almost like karate belts. So to achieve your level 1 or your white belt would be a way to think of it. You'd have to do something really simple like bounce the ball in your racket, hit a couple forehands and backhands. And level 2 would be a little bit harder. Level 3 would be a little bit harder again, until eventually a level 10 would be something like the player's got to hit 20 figure eights, complete a ghosting routine in a set amount of time, and maybe win a match or two at a gold tournament. So all these things encourages kids to participate and progress, and it's a very tangible way for them to see their progression. So I really love this idea. I stole it from a club I saw in the US, and we're now implementing it, in the process of implementing it at the Toronto Lawn. Next slide. So key success metrics. So knowing your metrics is key for providing you with a tangible way to measure your progress. So I can't stress how important this is. A lot of clubs will make you report financials in various ways, so that's a measure of growth. But here are some of the key ones that we use. Obviously, number of kids in clinics, the number of girls in clinics, the number of junior squash members, the number of kids participating in junior club championships. At Toronto Lawn, we like to have 50 kids in our junior club championships. That's our goal every year. So pros push for that. Like I said, we try to get about 20 kids in our junior silver. So those are the different metrics you can, of course, revenue is a great measure of engagement. The more they do, the more they spend. Clinic revenue, camp revenue, so on and so forth. And it keeps you motivated, knowing where you are in the past and where you need to get to. All right, next slide. So make it fun and recognize and celebrate success. So we talked earlier about that balance between fun and learning. And we talked earlier also about celebrating that success through pictures. I took my son, who was 8 years old, to his first ever squash tournament, and I chose the Granite Club because Jim Patton does the most amazing bronze tournament. He calls it the Fast Eddie. My kid did not win one game, but he had the best time. Jim has all these fun prizes: best dressed, most refereeing done, most improved, best attitude, worst left call. Just funny and fun. My son, even though he didn't win a game, loved it, had a great experience, can't wait to go back to his next tournament. So, you know, think of that. Jim is a great example of that. Don't underestimate how much kids value recognition. They're lifelong memories. So really take the time. It's easy when you get old and jaded like I am to gloss through, here's your trophy, get out the door. But take your time, take those pictures, let the parents take their pictures. Think back to your start in squash. Like, what do you remember? You know, those tournaments, those experiences, those moments, you know, those are the things that really kept you enthusiastic in coming back. Okay, the next slide. So one thing we're a big fan of is using your own kids to mentor your young ones. This is important for two reasons. One, it keeps them engaged, and also gives the young ones great mentors to look up to. And so we use our older kids in our camps. You can see in that picture there on the left is Sadie Wilson. She played for Queen's University. So this is probably when she's in her U19 year. She came in and you know, mentored the kids. And we try to have a kid or two in every camp. We also try to have them in every clinic. So we try to have a kid, and even if you use that gold player to just rally with other kids, that's a fantastic way to keep those kids engaged and have the young ones have kids to look up to, because they really do look up to the kids who are more successful in your program. The last thing we do is we have an actual direct mentoring. So we might pair up a top U19 with a prospective U11 or U13, and that's been really successful. We've had some amazing kids give back. Alexi and Julian Gosset are always really good at getting on court with kids like Ewan Harris and Alex Usby. So that is such a valuable thing if you can convince your older kids to do it, which they usually step up and are happy to do it. All right, building a sense of team and community, the next slide there. Same idea, you know, take lots of pictures, post them around the club. It builds this whole concept. Go with your kids to other clubs and do little home and aways. Consider uniforms. You know, whenever I go to a junior tournament these days, I see the West Coast Academy. I think they've done a great job. Big shirt. Most clubs that do this, it's really key. And you know, create a friendly rivalry with another club. We had the BNR for years, and always trying to have better kids and better programs. So it was a great little rivalry, and it drove both clubs to be a lot better. And next slide. So coming back to that kind of theme you've seen throughout this presentation, inspire the kids and they will stay. Take them to tournaments yourself, coach them at the tournaments. You know, even if you charge for that service, but being there is important for the kids. I'll talk next week about why you shouldn't coach them in every single game, but be there at the tournament when you can. Take them to watch the pros. That's another incredible thing you can do. We've had all kinds of pros at our club for exhibitions over the years, from Remy Assure to people you wouldn't even remember, Terry Linku and all these guys, Jonathan Power, obviously. So it is such an inspiring thing. It can inspire the kids and adults for an entire season. So yeah, if there isn't a tournament nearby, arrange for a pro to come. If that's outside your budget, there's PSA TV, which is a great substitute. We have it playing at the club all the time on TVs near where squash is going on. And we get the kids watching it and teach them who the top players are, help them get into their stories and follow it along. All right, next slide. Right, so this is just a quick thing to say, remember why you started playing squash in the first place. I mean, we all started because we love the game, and speak to that. What do you love about squash? Like, what do you know, spread your enthusiasm for the game. It doesn't have to be like, hey kids, I love squash because it doesn't have to be that stilted. It can be like, hey, come check out this amazing rally. Like, oh, look at this incredible shot this person hit. Or, oh, that shot you just hit, that's like actually pro level. If you could string 5 of those together in a row, you're going to be another level. So remember that it's your love and your enthusiasm that people will feel, and don't ever be afraid to unleash that, because that's truly your most powerful tool in selling the game of squash to everybody around you. So that's it. I kind of raced a little bit through my last bunch of slides just because I want to have a little bit of time for questions at the end. Thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully there were some helpful bits of information, and I will turn this over to Jeff for any questions anybody might have.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. That was a fabulous presentation. We do have 3 or 4 questions in the chat that I'll go through first, and then we'll see if anyone else has any. First question is, do you use a ball machine in your program at all?
Yeah, we do use a ball machine. I don't personally use one, and again, that just speaks to me being a bit of a dinosaur of a coach. I like that to directly feel, but Mark Pro, who's got to be one of the best pros in Canada, is a big fan of the ball machine. He uses it all the time, and so do our assistant pros.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Do you have any favorite source, library of drills and games?
I have, over the years, used different sources. Because I've been doing it for so long, it's a lot of the kind of the best hits drills that we've used over the time, but I think the best source right now going is Squash Drills, which is a UK-based online platform, which we do subscribe to at the club. I have looked through that and found some incredible resources and drills, and even tweaked some of the stuff we currently do with what I've seen there. So Squash Drills is absolutely fantastic.
Okay, next question. What tools or methods have you used to ensure a junior switches their grip to what you are looking for?
Oh, great question. Funny, I think Melanie's on this call. Her and I were chatting about this a couple of months back. I've got, so does everybody know what furniture pads, like obviously you can't answer this, it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but I use these furniture pads. They're like these brown little beige pads you can buy at any Canadian Tire. And what I do is I use 2 steps basically. So I'll take a kid and I'll put his hand on the racket, or her hand on the racket with the proper grip, and I'll take a pen or a marker and I'll trace around the proper grip, and I'll have the kid aim to try to get to that grip. Now, some kids aren't able to do it with just a marker, so I will then go the next step, which are those furniture pads, and I actually stick them on the racket where the marker lines are, and it forces them to hold the racket in a particular way. Now, what I'll say about that is, don't go from like a really wonky grip to perfect in one shot. Do it in a progressive way. So I'll take those, with the marker approach, I'll draw on with a Sharpie a grip that's halfway between the right grip and their grip. So they first go to that halfway point, and maybe even 3/4 point, and then to the full proper grip. And I'll let that take time, like a year. It's totally fine, as long as they're on the right track and they're progressing forwards. What I find is with the marker, they tend to like go back to their basic habits and their old grip. So that's why I like the furniture pad, because it's sticky, it stays on the grip, and it kind of forces them almost like a mold would into the proper grip.
Okay, another question. This one's in relation to a couple of slides ago with regards to the volunteering of your older kids. Do the older kids do this as volunteering? Like, do they get hours for high school, or does the club do anything for them from a volunteering standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of our kids in Ontario have this, I think I want to call it Duke of Kent. It's like a volunteer thing that they have to do, and they have to achieve X number of hours. So we always sign off on those for them. So they'll come in and go, okay, I did X number of hours. So we encourage them to get their volunteer hours through squash coaching. And then we also entice them to do that through progression of learning. So we start them off as counselors in training, then they become counselors, and then we pay them through that process. So we'll start off with, not for the counselor in training role, but maybe once they reach a counselor, we're going to pay them a minimum wage and go on from there. So there is a potential, and we will tie things, say, okay, you got to get your coaching foundations or whatever that level 1 is called these days. So yeah, that's how we incentivize them, by helping them complete their volunteer hours and then also moving them into a paid position slowly over time.
Okay, next question is, what is the most effective balance of programming versus open booking times?
Okay, so I'm going to assume that's a broader club question. I'll just say quickly, I'm willing to stay on a little longer here if people have more questions. I do have another 10 minutes I can give. But okay, so for that question, we like to lean on the programming side for kids, absolutely, because free play for kids just doesn't happen. Like, they just don't take the initiative to call each other and or set up games until they're much, much older. So I will have parents say, why does my 15-year-old still not arrange games? Because they won't. It's just kids are too shy. They're just not going to do it. So we program heavily on the kids side, and once they reach like 16 above, then we recognize if they're super engaged, they're going to do that on their own. And I guess same answer for adults. We like the program, but with adults, some just want to play their own. So there's a much higher percentage of adults doing their own thing. The exact percentage, okay, so I'll give you an example. So every day at our club, 4:20 and 5 o'clock, every single squash court is gone for junior programs. Members can't play during, we take them all. There's only 3, so we need them all. And then we have our house leagues. And so it leaves, maybe 2.5 of the 5 weekdays for free play. So figure about 50-50. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, we'll make this the last question that I see here. How do you get new squash players from outside of your club?
Right. So I can answer that question, but Toronto Lawn doesn't want players from outside the club. It's a private club, so you have to be a club member. So we don't do that at the Toronto Lawn. But with Glendon, the Glendon program that I run for my own kids who play in that, and there's about 20 kids in that now, I primarily got kids through my through Kids Fund Network, so that necessarily wouldn't apply, but through advertising through the schools. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I think it was $25 a month, and I was able to run an ad all year round, or as long as I wanted. And that ad basically said, Glendon Squash Program, taught by nationally certified coaches for kids between such and such an age. I put the ad together with a picture of the kids and some, word on a Word document, this little text box, super easy and really effective. I found that to be my most effective kind of community-based advertising approach. And I would recommend that just because it's super affordable. The nice thing about when you advertise in a school is that you have the school's endorsement. They're allowing you to put the ad, so it looks like it's a school endorsed program. And it's not officially that, but to some extent it is if they're willing to advertise for you. So I find that people are much more open and much more receptive. And one other way that I had some success as well was in my community, there's a Facebook page, and most communities have Facebook pages. So I was able to post that same ad and just say a few words about the program on the Facebook page. It was free. And then a couple of my parents commented on it and said, oh, this is a great program. And you can even prompt them to do that. Hey guys, I posted something on the Facebook page. Would you mind? It's not, I didn't actually make a page. I just went into the community. You could make a Facebook page as well. I just went into the community chat there and posted information about my program, and I got people interested from there as well. So those are two great free or super cheap ways to advertise into the broader community.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And just Melanie Jans just threw in a comment as well. Learn to play programs with a free trial membership. Facebook Mom groups as well is another way to do it. So yeah, those are great suggestions, Mel. Thank you. Okay, so on behalf of Squash Canada, I'd like to first off thank Andrew for your wonderful presentation today. I don't even play squash, and I feel like I learned a ton of new things that I could even implement in my own sport of curling. So that was a great presentation. A couple of action items for everybody on today. I will be entering this into your coach profile if you're a coach in the NCCB Locker database later today, so you'll get your PD point. And I will email out the slides later today or tomorrow as well. So you should see that, as well as hopefully a link to the presentation as well. So you'll see those. Next week, as Andrew mentioned, he'll be back next Wednesday, September 16th with topic Elevating High Performance Juniors to College and International Squash. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And then after that, October 1st, we're quite excited. This is a free webinar, Gender Equity in Squash. So it goes to a little bit of what Andrew talked about, getting girls and women in sport and squash specifically. Our own Tara Mullins will be speaking to gender equity and female engagement and everything that goes with that. And then in October 20th, we have Glenn Mulcahy from Paradigm Sports will be speaking to the topic, Don't Be a Kid's Last Coach. And so those are the three additional webinars we've lined up, and we will have more coming in November and December, as well as into 2021. So we hope that you enjoyed today's presentation and that you'll consider registering for the upcoming presentations as we go forward. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.